Thank you, everybody. We're so happy to have you back here with us for our afternoon. We hope your lunch was wonderful. I hope you had the best catering of all. I swear I ordered all the good stuff. Next we have Laurie Fox joining us. Laurie is going to be doing a presentation on project governance at her campus. We're very excited to have some SUNY examples of what's going on. So I am going to let Laurie go. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you, Chris. I'm very excited to be with you all today for this great regional forum. I really enjoyed April's talks this morning, and it made me, of course, a little bit nervous for my talk this afternoon because I'm going to talk to you about cruising along really without project governance. And I'm going to talk about how we work formally and informally together on projects in my department at Geneseo. We do not have a project steering board, so my presentation is going to talk about ways that you can select and prioritize projects, track your project progress, communicate with stakeholders, and evaluate outcomes. So let's start with a few introductions. Geneseo is obviously one of the SUNY comprehensive colleges. We are a liberal arts college. We have about 5,000 undergraduates, 100 graduate students in education and accounting, and 400 faculty. I work for CIT, Computing and Information Technology. We provide a wide range of services to support the campus community. We have 33 employees, and we're divided into 5 functional areas: support services, systems, networking, information systems, and educational technology. And I'm the director of educational technology. And I included a picture of myself. There's what I look like working from home. I'm sitting by the window. We have snow outside, but the sun is shining. I upgraded the hoodie for a jacket today. I thought we'd be a little professional, but I am wearing slippers. So we are definitely in work from home mode today. I've been at Geneseo for just over 25 years. I have an undergraduate degree in management science, and I'm currently working on my MBA in technology management at SUNY Poly. So if any of you have been fortunate enough to take grad courses at SUNY Poly, you'll actually see that I took that foundational project management course because I actually referenced some of the work we did in that course to justify and reinforce that what we're doing at Geneseo is on the right track. I'm a frequent cross-functional project leader for our department, and actually I frequently work on projects outside of our department too. Project management is something that I love to do. In my performance program, it says that I act as a project manager for the projects that originate from my group. So I want to talk a little bit more about CIT because when I share with you information about how we select and prioritize our projects for the department, it's going to come back to our vision, mission, and goals. Our college, like many of you, works to be very mission-driven and goal-driven about the projects that we select to work on. Each of our projects, we fit them into our goals so that everyone on the project team is aware of why we are doing these projects. Now, many of our projects fall to reliability, especially in an IT department, as we upgrade to new versions of Banner, for example. Those are the types of things that are projects that may reoccur, but we do them quite frequently. So I just wanted to share with you our vision and goals so you could get a sense for how we operate. Our department, as you would expect, has a functional organization. Very typical CIO, 5 directors, employees underneath. There is no logical place in our department for central project management function. I'm jealous of my colleagues at large universities with large IT staffs where they actually have a project manager who is involved in assisting with projects. So the employees in my department, we tend to become functionally siloed. That's not a bad thing. That's just the main focus of our job, especially in our organizational structure. So leadership of the projects typically falls to the management level. Now, the drawback for project completion, as you may be aware, is that projects can easily be set aside for daily work. So as project managers, we need to keep the work of the project in the focus of people involved in our groups. I've also found that this means that there's little opportunity to develop other project leaders among our department. If the managers are always the project leaders, then anyone working on the project tends to look toward a manager to take charge. This slide is adapted from my college project management book. And I wanted you all to think a bit about how mature is your project management process, either in your department or at your college. Now, if I had done this presentation 5 or 6 years ago, I might have said that we had low maturity in our project management. A lot of things we did were ad hoc. We were terrible about working together on common language, and we did little to support each other in our projects. We were super siloed. And when I look back to one of my first projects, which was a single sign-on project back in 1999, and I think about how little I knew about project management and how amazed and lucky I feel that we finished that project and met all of our goals. In Geneseo's CIT department, we're coming closer to a moderate maturity. We have some defined practices. Several of us have worked together to create documents that we use for every project, which I'll show you. And we have started to support each other in how our projects are managed. So think about how mature is your project management, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through my presentation. So the next section we're going to talk about is how to select and prioritize projects. We sometimes don't get a choice about selecting projects, and that's a fact of life in an IT department, in my opinion, and higher ed. How about a department that gets a grant for some new software and then brings it to you to implement? That happens. So here's how we select and prioritize and schedule our projects. As I said earlier, all of our projects are tied to our department's goals. Defining the project is a one-time project, and we schedule our projects based on people who are participating in the project, on their workload, and the external deadlines. The next step is selecting a team. That's in the lower right-hand corner here. And our project teams are selected based on their skills, their knowledge, and their interest in the project. And one of the things that we have tried to be very careful about is not adding the same person to every department project. Although in a somewhat small department like ours, sometimes that happens. That one guy might be the single sign-on guy, and he needs to be part of every project that has to tie into single sign-on. But when we get into resource management, we recognize that and try to help schedule his his time working with the project so it fits with his other responsibilities. Project portfolio management. This is another one of those things that we are handling at the manager's level. Our leadership meets weekly. We have a standing weekly agenda item where we review projects and their progress and things that we need for them. Usually if things are going fine, it's just a checkbox. Everything's going great with that project. Nothing is a surprise. But there may be some weeks that we spend quite a bit of time acting as that steering committee, resolving problems that may be arising with that project. I was confessing to Chris before the session started that some of us are better than others at updating our project status. And that's absolutely an area that we try to consciously stay on top of so we don't run into any surprises with our projects. One problem that we have with this model is scarce resources. I mentioned that a bit already. But for the most part, with the leadership team working together, we're able to complete our projects on time and successfully. Now, a few slides ago, I showed you this, the departmental mission, vision, and goals. And the goals that you see on this slide actually are a little bit different than the goals our department has. These are the annual goals for our department where we provide assessment results and report on the work that we do. And a few of these are nice buckets to keep track of and organize projects that we do throughout the year. And I'm going to show you examples of how we categorize things. So the next thing I want to talk about is tracking our project progress. We don't use a formal project management software. I think that some of it is cost related. Some of those software packages are pretty expensive, but we do leverage the software that we have to track them. And many of these will sound familiar to you. The first is Confluence Wiki. Our department uses the wiki for just about everything, external and internal focused. We have a project page for each project, and we created a template for creating that. I'll show you how that looks. And it's a space for us to keep track of current status, resources that are involved, all of our contact and communication plans, and also meeting minutes for the project committees. We work very hard to make sure that we take minutes for all of our meetings. So what I'm showing here is some examples of things that are also in Jira. Jira is our ticketing system. And also we use it, this is an example of a board used by our systems group to track their project progress. So in the upper right, you'll see I just grabbed a snapshot of a week earlier this year where our systems team is implementing a new identity management program. And they are using a typical board setup that shows each of the steps that need to be done and whose responsibility it is. The lower right shows the task list for a recent project we did to replace our campus backup solution for our endpoints. And you'll see again that each of the tasks has its own issue and the assignee and then how they are all linked. And this really is a great place as project managers for us to go look and see how the progress is going. Here are a few examples of Confluence wiki pages where On the left, we have our project information panel, and it down to the items that we think are most relevant to see at a glance. We name our projects. I like to name my projects something fun. I always think adding a bit of levity to these sorts of things makes it feel a little bit less like work. We establish a starting date. We have been working very hard to make sure that our project process is formalized. We don't just slide into projects. We talk about and have a kickoff event and start the projects and move forward from there. The completion date, like I said earlier, is decided typically by the management team, with the manager who is lead on the project having obviously the most input about when it can be completed. This project completion date is not always set by us. Many times it's something that a customer of ours needs, or perhaps we're implementing a new software product that has a deadline. We also have been careful to identify the project lead. Several years ago, when I started doing project management, we were careful not to establish a project lead because I think we were too worried that people would feel like they had two supervisors or two bosses to report to. But you really need to have a project lead, someone that is the point person for the project. We list all of our project managers and describe the position, and then we use the status bubbles on this page and on our external projects page as well. We have a full page of projects that we've been working on over the last year. You'll see at the top of this page, we listed our strategic goals. These strategic goals are the second set of goals for our department that we establish at the time of our annual report and assessment review. So each of our projects is, on this list, assigned a goal that it's tied to. And then in Confluence, you can search by the goal. So when it comes time for us to do the annual report, we have a status of all of our department projects. This has been the greatest improvement in the last few years so that we can very quickly see the status of all of our department projects. Now, the interesting thing to me that I noticed when I grabbed this screenshot last week is that the status of some of our projects is ongoing. And that's not quite accurate, because one of the things that we try to do is to recognize that a project is a finite thing. It's not a process that happens routinely or that you do every few months. So the status for these projects really should say either in progress, or I actually believe these might be complete, especially considering the date. And we do put all different sizes of projects here. For example, the Blackboard Ally implementation really involved, I think, just 3 people, but we still consider it a project and report on that at the end of the year. David Allen wrote a book called Getting Things Done, and another one of my interests is productivity. And I first read his book about 12 years ago. The reference that I have here, he recently updated his Getting Things Done book. But in one of his chapters, he talks about natural project planning. And this was a big aha moment for me. And it's something that I think about when I'm working on projects. Excuse me. So I grabbed my copy of the book, and I wanted to share this information with you. I've often thought of people as great natural project leaders, but until I read this book, I didn't realize that that's actually a real thing. It's more than just a compliment about how organized you are. There are 6 areas in this natural project planning that the book talks about that natural project planners need to have. The first is understanding the purpose. And if I step back one slide, that ties into the project description, but it also ties into our strategic goals. What is the purpose of this project? Why are we doing this? What will make it a success? What are our goals? Principles, same sort of thing, tied in with our mission and goals. It's always helpful for all of us to see how the work we do, be it day to day or in a project, how we tie in with the goals of our university. The outcomes, what will the outcome be to know that we were successful with this project? Then really the next thing we start with is brainstorming. The graphics that I chose are sticky notes for a reason. I love sticky notes for organizing for a project. I use them for organizing for a presentation. Brainstorming is an important part of the project, and I think one of the most enjoyable parts of working with a variety of people on a project planning team. Certainly, the technical experts on my team know more than I do about all of the things that need to happen before I can give faculty access to our new LMS. Next comes organization. And organization is different for each of the managers that I work with at Geneseo. Some make charts, some make Gantt charts, which are fantastic. Some of us make a list, excuse me, or a task list, a checklist. You saw 2 examples earlier of how we use Jira. And the most important part of natural project leadership is how to deal with stuckness. How do you get past either a technical difficulty or maybe a resource need to keep going with the project? So I encourage you to read the book or skim the book if you've never read it. It's a fantastic book. But when you think about project planning, think about how naturally do you organize a project? And P.S., I use natural project planning in all aspects of my life, right down to planning Thanksgiving dinner last week. And we sat down to eat at 5 minutes to 2, which is one of the best met I've ever had of a goal of we're eating at 2. We sat down at 5 minutes to 2. It was great. Communication with stakeholders. Stakeholders are obviously very important to your project management process. One of the main ways that we communicate with our stakeholders is to have a public-facing projects page. You'll see that maybe you recognize this is part of the wiki. We use the same bubbles for status. This shows a basic description of the project, when we estimate we'll complete it, and we try to update it frequently. Personally, I need to have a reminder on my to-do list. Every Tuesday, I go out and take a look at this page and update the status of our projects. Especially this year, it felt like so many of our projects were stuck. We were all working on the day-to-day and losing track of the projects. So it's nice to get back into the projects and be able to make some progress. I picked a snippet from our project page that shows how we identify stakeholders. Most of our stakeholders are internal, and that's because we're a department. I'm just talking about our department, not about the college as a whole. So stakeholders typically are management, our CIO, maybe even the provost, the project team members. How do we communicate to each other about the project? Our internal customers and the campus community. We also frequently deal with vendor partners, so there are communication considerations there. And then I added government SUNY. Sometimes we have things that that are mandated for us that we need to update. So for each of our communication, the stakeholders to the communications, we identify guidelines for how we're going to communicate with these stakeholders. We actually developed a document that has timeline, channel, how are we going to communicate with them, the purpose of our communication, who our audience is. It's sometimes difficult to figure out if we say faculty, do we really mean faculty and staff? Do we really mean all staff? Who do we mean? We also determine a sender. This is something that we established within about the last year because it's somewhat confusing. People outside of our department, our customers, don't generally know who we all are or why we're all communicating with them. So we actually have a conversation. Who does the message come from? Is it sent from our CIO? Is it something we send from the help desk? Is the project manager going to send it? And we actually work together to edit the subject and the body of the message. We have a space in our Google Drive where we have communications, and now we have a process where we tag each other and work together to outline the communications. And I think it has really improved our communications to do this activity and think about this exercise. The last piece of our project management is evaluating the outcomes. It's tempting when you finish that project to close up the binder, put it on the shelf, move on to your next project. But we've really been working to evaluate, how did the project go? What went well? What could we do better? So at the end of the project, we review our timeline. Did we meet all of our deadlines? Was it realistic to think that we could establish a connection to our single sign-on in 2 weeks? Or did it really take Dave 3 or 4 weeks because of his other work obligations? Because clearly that impacts our other projects. We also review our outcomes. Did we complete what we thought we were going to complete in the beginning? Because sometimes our projects really shift and change. Does the client accept our outcome? Sometimes that's ourselves, but it's always good to see, did they get what they expected? We also go through and update all of our wiki project pages to put a nice neat bow on finishing it, and we close all of our JIRA issues. And I added an example of our final stakeholder communication. We always end our projects with a final communication to the stakeholders to say, we're done. We finished it. Here's what we accomplished. I should have added here, it's important we also take time to add it to our annual report. Our annual report is due in June of each year, but we are already building it because as we complete a project, we write about that project in our annual report. And it's much easier if we remember to do it in December. So I don't have to go back in June and say, now what classroom changes did I make last summer? So we try to keep updating our report so that it's much easier to pull together at the end of the year. Now, this is special for Chris. Chris asked me to talk some more about our retrospectives. We, at Geneseo, one of our managers introduced to us about 3 or 4 years ago the idea of blameless retrospectives. We started using them when we had an outage on campus. That's where they originated. Let's just say accidentally, I kicked a power supply. I turned off one of the main routers and we lost networking. It's really hard for me to admit I did something like that. Once our department introduced the idea of blameless retrospectives, we're able to work together to say what happened, what went well, what could be improved. I mean, we're very gentle with each other. When you talk about what could be improved, it makes people less afraid to share what they may have earlier considered to be a mistake or something that they needed to hide because they were worried. We do retrospectives not just for emergencies, but at the end of sprints, at the end of projects. Sometimes we even we do them after the start of a semester. I've run them a couple times this year as we transition to remote learning, just to see, did we get everything? Was there something we missed? Is there something we could do better? And we have a whole collection of documents where we take notes for the retrospectives. One of the things that I love about the retrospectives, I mean, besides the fact that they're blameless, is that they're open to everyone in our department. So if someone is interested to hear how the project to upgrade our printers went, you're welcome to sit in on the retrospective to hear all of the different aspects of the college. So it's also a great learning opportunity. Etsy has this idea of a just culture. At the bottom of this slide, I included an article about that was written by someone at Etsy that talks about this idea of blameless postmortems. And I think that that's a fantastic article and something that's great to think about. So here are my keys to project governance success. I mean, the first thing is defining clear project goals. In order to meet those goals, we need to know what we're working for. Crystal, do we also invite student employees to attend? We've never formally invited them, but they certainly would be welcome. Especially some of our students that work on projects with us. It would be a fantastic example for them. I'm also a big believer in established deadlines. I mean, part of that for me is that I'm externally motivated. If I promise something to you, I'm going to get it done in time. But deadlines are very helpful. This isn't a project that is just going to go on forever. This is a project that we're going to have done April 1st. And I have picked April 1st for a project deadline. I won't do it again. I thought it was fun. It was not a good idea. I think a committed project team is also very important. And one of the ways that I work to develop that commitment from my team is by the first two activities, right? We need the project team to be aware of what they're working for and what their deadlines are. I am much happier being invited to your project team if I know it's done in March and I know that I can give you all of my efforts until March, and then the project will be done, and I'm either back to my daily duties or more than likely onto another project, right? I also establish scheduled meetings. We meet routinely to update each other on our progress. Sometimes for me, those are deadlines too, right? At the next meeting, we're going to offer an update on how the integration is going with our LMS. Well, shoot, that's a great deadline for me to get it done. We also use this opportunity to give updates to our management team. And we talked about how we communicate clearly with our stakeholders, and then we finish the project. We make sure it's done, and we run the retrospective, tie up all of our documentation, and on to the next project. So when I think back on our process, it's not formal. It's not, we don't have a PMO, which I think sometimes would be great to have some help organizing projects, because sometimes it's hard to juggle all of these things. And I feel like I wish that our college had a governance board to work on projects overall. Those of you, I know many of you attending today are part of an IT department. How many times do you hear about a project where IT is brought in because they realize, oh, we do need help implementing that software or setting up that computer lab? So I feel like that's an opportunity for my college to really grow into really some excellent project management. So I have been watching the discussion a little bit, but I wonder, Chris, have any questions come in? Oh, you're muted.
I haven't seen any questions come in. We would definitely love to spend the last time of Laurie's presentation asking some questions.
Or I would love to hear how things work at your college or what you do differently that might help me as well.
Yep, this is a great time to share some different things. I know we've been watching the discussion forum and the Q&A. Feel free to pop some stuff in there. We'd definitely like to ask Laurie some questions about her expertise. Krista, did you want to ask something?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Laurie. Great talk. I am really interested in hearing more about your comment called dealing with stuckness. Okay. It probably has a lot of different meanings. Help us understand ways you identify if you are even stuck, or is it really something else?
Sure. Personally, I think we get stuck on two things. It's either people or it's technology. Okay. And even the technology can be tied back to people. I think combined with the fact that we don't have formal project management office and that we are this functional group, sometimes I find that people that are involved in a project aren't able to work on the project because they feel like their day-to-day responsibilities are too overwhelming and they don't have time for the project. And sometimes in our department, you really need to spend time on the projects. A few of our positions, if we have more than one person, I may decide that that person who's more focused on the day-to-day functional aspect of their job isn't part of a project committee that is intense or very time sensitive. But I think as far as stuckness, there needs to be good awareness by the project manager that an employee is not spending the time they should be on the project. Maybe we need additional resources. Maybe we need an opportunity to lift their day-to-day responsibilities. And in some of the projects, like when we did a Google implementation, there were some times where we had some really intensive obligations to help people one-on-one transfer to the Google ecosystem from our in-house email server, right? And what we decided to do is, as our desktop professionals were helping departments, the other people in my department helped back up their day-to-day duties to give them freedom to work on the project. So I think that that's one part of being stuck, right? Is how to manage people who don't have the time to commit to your project. The other part of getting stuck for me is a technical part. And I love Deborah's comment about maybe the vendor's complete integration isn't so complete. Learning how to work with a vendor to get their product implemented is very important. And I see growth in my employees when they, I have someone who years ago, he would have banged his head against the wall and worked hours and hours and hours and hours to get through a technical problem. And now he's very adept at knowing it's time to ask for help. It's time to, again, to ask the vendor for help. Sometimes it's even time to talk with other people in our department. It's been a long time since I have been a frontline programmer for an ERP, but I still remember the theory. So if you're working on something, maybe I can help you just by listening, or maybe just by talking out loud. So in each of my project meetings, we talk about this idea of being stuck. What are you stuck on? What's holding you up? Do you need more time dedicated to the project? Do you need help, or do you have a technical issue? So I think those are really the things that make you stuck.
That's awesome, Laurie. I will tell everybody as well, Laurie did a great presentation for us in our community of practice on leadership within IT. She also did it at STC. So if you're interested in learning more about that topic, we can send that link out for people to watch as well. It was an awesome presentation.
Yeah. Deborah, the Blameless retrospectives are really fantastic, and I think you can use them for a lot of things. They, like I mentioned, we use them at first when we would have an outage. What happened? It is a great way to document how we resolve the problem, to go back and look and see how can we do it better the next time. So we actually, as soon as an incident happens, we create the document and start to gather things. So we actually create a timeline right in our retrospective page that shows, here's when we discovered the outage, here's how we learned about the outage. So many of the issues that we work on, communication is the cornerstone of making it work. Deborah, how did we change our culture? I want to flippantly say brute force, but it wasn't like that. We held a Blameless retrospective on a small issue first. And we started to kind of play around with it for some very small things. And once we were able to gather them, we suggested we try it for something bigger. And it really worked so well to be able to come back together. That we use them for just about everything. And they, it also, these retrospectives are a great collection to show at the end of the year, again, when we do our annual report. Or it's also a great way to keep our CIO in the loop without asking her to come to every meeting. She knows she can go look at that retrospective page and pull out the relevant points to report to the provost or president, you know, whoever's asking us for question. Oh, Center for Communications. Okay, so our communications are the most likely person to send a communication from our department is actually our CIO. We typically, we being the management team, will work together on the documentation, and she will send, especially during outages, she's the primary person to send the message. And for large projects or routine updates, like the example that I showed about, like classroom updates or things that changed over the summer, welcome back. She's the most likely person to send it, although we all work collaboratively to edit it. There are some of us, some of the directors that work for her have specific niches where we will send things. I manage our LMS, so I will send any information to the faculty about LMS support, teaching online, upcoming training, all of those types of things. Our support services manager will send notes about specific projects like our printer upgrades, The backup project was one that he did. And then our information systems director will send things about Banner or the website. That's 3 of our 5 managers. Our systems director and the networking director, they are less likely to ever need to send notes to the campus. So I picture that even if something came out of their area, it might be something that our CIO sends, because we certainly don't want people to say, who is this Sean guy and why is he sending me a message? So most of the things, like I said, come from our CIO. I did see a great presentation online last week where the director of support services was the one that sent the messages, and he sent them for everything for the department. So we have great discipline. Yeah, we do. We have really great discipline, and one of the ways that we're sure we do it is we use a lot of templates in Confluence. So for example, every week when our CIT leadership team meets, as our CIO is creating the agenda, she uses a template. And one item on the template is project updates. And it links to our project's external facing page and our internal page to help people to remember to go do that. So that's a Tuesday task for me. Every Tuesday I do that. And with Jira, we use dashboards. So a project manager would have on their dashboard information about that project, and it's just part of the closing activities or the weekly updates where we go out and say all of those items have been complete. And Krista, I see your comment about the annual report. As soon as we started keeping track of our projects by our goals, it made the annual report so much easier to put together. And it actually showed each year, here's exactly what we did to accomplish those goals. We really did ourselves a favor. How do we train people and build a culture or discipline? Does someone audit, or is the project or is it the project guru? So it's really been the leadership team in our department that has worked to create this great culture about projects and this formal setting. And I think that when we really started using and leveraging Confluence to keep track of our projects, as when you update a page in Confluence, everyone in the department sees it. We also, at our staff meetings, when the whole staff gets together, we do project updates and we talk about the projects, and there's really a lot of celebration when we finish a project, especially big ones, right? And when we meet the deadlines and everything is complete, there are a lot of accolades. And I think that really motivates people to do well on a project, to see that it's not something that's done privately. We all work together. So I don't think we really have someone that audits it, but because we are using Confluence to drive other things that we have to do at specific times of the year, it just naturally makes sure that we close things up. So maybe we had a small project that we didn't do a formal closing procedure. By the time I put together the annual report with the goals that I'm responsible for, I've gone back and cleaned up that project so it looks complete. It was complete, but now I'm just going to dot all the I's and cross the T's and get it done. So it's been pretty successful. Yeah, Krista, it does take a little bit of brute force or enthusiasm. Let's call it enthusiasm. We know it's brute force. What percentage of your time is PMO versus other tech work? As a manager, I am mostly project managing. I think that personally, I'm probably about 60% projects, 40% kind of day-to-day maintenance. I'm also involved. We have a new Center for Digital Learning. I'm involved there. I'm involved in a project where we, recently implemented EAB Navigate for an early alert system. So I spend a lot of time in projects. And I think if you gauged how much time I spend in meetings, I'm maybe about 80% projects. It's a lot of meetings. So, but I love it. I like it. I like projects because I like new things. I like change, and I like getting things done. I like checking things off my to-do list. I find it super satisfying. I like the communication aspect too. Although when I meet PMOs, I don't know if any of you on this session are actual PMOs. I think you have a very difficult job, and I respect you. I think that that's a really hard job. Certainly by what we saw in the presentations this morning.
Anybody else have any other questions they want to throw in the Q&A or the discussion forum to ask Laurie? Yeah, definitely, Deborah. This is great. This is kind of wraps it all up. We've seen some examples outside of SUNY. We've seen now we've seen an example inside SUNY, and we've got the concepts as well from this morning. So definitely some things that people can implement at their own campus.
And I'm happy to share anything. I'm fox@geneseo.edu. I'm happy to share any of our templates that we use. And I mean, I could talk more about blameless postmortems if there's something that you'd like to implement on your campus. I think that they're really great. So happy to talk with anyone offline.
Laurie, are you able to share with us some of your projects you're working on right now?
Sure. Actually, it's kind of funny that I have two big construction projects I'm working on. Those are very interesting because I am involved. I'm responsible for classrooms too. So I'm involved in two of those projects. I'm working on the EAB Navigate implementation. We rolled it out earlier this year, and now we're adding more features. And early alert is quite new to our campus. So I'm working with the dean's office to help them implement it and share information about it to people. We're going through a middle states review. Lots of fun stuff like that. And then really the biggest thing that I'm working on is launching of our Center for Digital Learning, where we're working with faculty affiliates and student affiliates to set up that center for people. Deborah, yes, we do have a template. Let me see. Let me see if I can find it real quick and I can show it. There we go. Application window. So we have, here's our internal projects page, which I grabbed some things here. Where are our postmortems? Okay. I think if I create it like this. No. So the retrospectives all have a date on them. It automatically asks who our participants are. and it creates these page properties, and then it's a simple list. Up here under the retrospective is where we put our timeline. We use Slack. And when so for an emergency, for example, we have a room that is just for emergencies. So we will export our Slack chat, and that becomes our timeline. That's really cool. But I love the list of what we did well and what we could have done better. And I'll tell you, most of the time, what did we do well outweighs what we could have done better. Because I think that listing it this way forces us to think about, if I'm going to say, you could have called the vendor faster, or you could have sent the note out faster. I'm also going to say, but the note was really great, or calling the vendor really worked. I'm fortunate to work with a lot of really positive people who think it's important to lift each other up, right? The actions section is also great because we take each of the things that we should have done better and turn those into actions and actually assign them to people to improve things for the next project or the next emergency. And that helps us be in a mindset of continually improving. What do we need to do better? And we store them so that you can go back and look at them anytime. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you so very much for everything, Laurie. This was a wonderful presentation. Lots of great lessons learned, lots of great tips and tricks for other campuses to put into place that are looking to improve their process. We really enjoyed it. Even though you don't have a governance board, you guys do a very good job of steering, in my opinion. Wouldn't you say, Krista?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very good. So, and we do have plans to bring Laurie back for a monthly webinar to talk more about those blameless retrospectives. They are.
I'll bring some. I'll bring my colleagues with me too, so you get a little bit of a different perspective from.
Oh, that would be fun.
From other people.
Yeah, definitely keep an eye on the workplace group when that will be announced so that we can let you know, so that you can definitely take a look at that. So we're going to end a little bit early here, give you guys a little bit more time before we go into the breakout room primer for the training. It's going to be a quick training. The breakout rooms are pretty easy to use, but we just want to give you a little bit of heads up of what you're going to see. So if you also could do me a favor and find your emails that tell you what to, I would appreciate it, just so you're prepared. A couple of you we reassigned during lunch, so you guys will have two. You're going to want the most recent breakout room email. I apologize for that. We just wanted to make sure we were well distributed. If there is nothing else for Laurie, then we will let you go a little bit early, and then we will go from there. All right, we will see you back at 2:03. Thank you, Laurie. We really appreciate it.
Laurie,
bye.
Great job.